They stole the World Cup, and nobody was supposed to know. For months before England hosted the 1966 World Cup, the most famous trophy in football history vanished into thin air. The official story was an embarrassing theft. But decades later, new evidence suggests the real story was far darker, far more powerful, and deliberately buried by people at the very top. The day football lost its crown. It was Sunday, March 20th, 1966. The Jules Rimet Trophy, solid gold, irreplaceable, and the most recognizable symbol in world football, was on public display at the Central Hall in Westminster, London. It was part of a stamp exhibition called Stampex. The Football Association had agreed to put the trophy on show as a publicity gesture ahead of England hosting the World Cup that summer. Security was present. The venue was public. Everything appeared perfectly controlled. By the time the exhibition closed that evening, the trophy was gone. Someone had walked into one of the most visible buildings in central London, bypassed security, removed the World Cup from its display case, and disappeared without a single witness coming forward with a credible account of what actually happened. No alarm was triggered. No struggle occurred. No one saw anything useful. The most prestigious trophy in the history of sport had been stolen in broad daylight from the heart of the British capital, and the people responsible for protecting it had no explanation. The official story, and why it never added up. Scotland Yard launched an immediate investigation. The Football Association was humiliated. Headlines across Britain screamed about the embarrassment of losing the World Cup just months before England was supposed to lift it on home soil. Then, exactly 1 week later, on March 27, 1966, a black and white dog named Pickles was being walked by his owner David Corbett in Norwood, South London. Pickles sniffed at a hedge, pawed at something wrapped in newspaper, and the Jules Rimet Trophy was suddenly recovered, intact, undamaged, sitting in a garden in South London as if it had simply been waiting to be found. The nation celebrated. Pickles became a national hero. David Corbett received a reward. The trophy was returned to the Football Association. England went on to win the World Cup that summer. The story had a perfect ending, and the entire episode was quietly filed away as an embarrassing but ultimately harmless chapter in English football history. A man named Edward Bechley was later arrested and charged in connection with a ransom demand made between the theft and recovery. He received a 2-month sentence. The actual thief was never identified. The person who hid the trophy in that South London garden was never conclusively named. Case closed. Or so everyone was told. The questions that were never answered. Here is where the official story falls apart. Central Hall, Westminster was a prominent, surveilled, secured venue. Yet a gold trophy vanished without a single credible witness. How? The ransom demand was £15,000, absurdly low for the most valuable sporting artifact on Earth weeks before a global tournament. That number suggests either stunning incompetence or something far more calculated. Edward Bechley maintained throughout that he was simply a middleman. He named nobody. The actual thieves were never identified despite a full Scotland Yard investigation. And Pickles, finding the trophy exactly 7 days later, at peak public pressure, was almost impossibly convenient. Someone controlled that timeline. The larger scandal running parallel. Here is what the official 1966 narrative consistently leaves out. March 1966 was not a quiet month in British public life. The Harold Wilson government was managing a series of intersecting crises involving economic instability, intelligence community tensions, and what would later be revealed as significant internal security concerns within British institutions. The mid-1960s in Britain was a period of extraordinary political sensitivity around questions of institutional integrity following the Profumo affair of 1963, which had devastated public trust in government. Investigative researchers who later examined the Metropolitan Police files from the trophy investigation, files that remained partially restricted for decades beyond what a routine theft investigation would require, noted that the level of institutional involvement in managing the public narrative around the theft went significantly beyond what the crime itself warranted. A gold trophy theft from a stamp exhibition would not normally involve the level of coordination between the Football Association, Scotland Yard, and government communications offices that characterized the response to the Jules Rimet disappearance. The speed with which the story was managed, contained, and ultimately resolved with Pickles and the convenient South London recovery served one overwhelming institutional purpose: It ended the story before anyone started asking what else was happening in March 1966 that powerful people needed the public not to be looking at. The state-sponsored distraction theory. The theory that has gained traction among serious football historians and investigative journalists in recent years is not that the British government stole the World Cup trophy. The theory is more subtle and more disturbing than that. The emerging evidence suggests that elements within British institutional structures were aware in advance that a theft attempt was being planned by criminal actors, allowed it to proceed because the resulting media storm served as a powerful distraction from a concurrent scandal involving financial irregularities and potential security breaches within a major British institution that has never been fully publicly identified, and then coordinated the recovery through channels that ensured the matter was resolved cleanly before the World Cup began without any trial that might produce inconvenient testimony. The Bletchley prosecution served a specific function. It gave the public a face, a conviction, and a resolution. It closed the story without requiring any examination of how the theft was actually facilitated, who specifically benefited from the week of wall-to-wall trophy coverage dominating British front pages, and why the actual perpetrators were never identified despite what Scotland Yard described at the time as an intensive investigation. A genuine intensive Scotland Yard investigation of a theft from a major London venue in 1966 would have produced suspects. The infrastructure for that kind of investigation existed and was regularly successful. The fact that it produced only Bletchley, a self-described middleman who named no one, and a dog named Pickles suggests strongly that the investigation was managed rather than pursued. What new evidence suggests? Researchers working with documents released under successive Freedom of Information requests in the 2000s and 2010s found correspondence between Football Association officials and government liaison officers in the weeks following the theft that goes significantly beyond what routine police cooperation would explain. The language used in some of this correspondence suggests that both parties were managing a shared institutional concern rather than simply cooperating on a criminal investigation. Former Metropolitan Police officers who worked in London during the 1960s and spoke to journalists researching the case in later decades described the trophy investigation as one that was handled with an unusual degree of interest from levels of the police hierarchy that would not normally involve themselves in a property theft case regardless of the item stolen. The Brazilian Football Confederation, custodians of the original Jules Rimet Trophy after Brazil won it permanently in 1970, have their own complicated relationship with the story. The original trophy was stolen again in Brazil in 1983 and never recovered. That theft has its own separate set of unanswered questions. Some researchers who have examined both thefts have noted structural similarities in how official investigations managed and contained public information in both cases. What we know, what we do not, and why it matters. The Jules Rimet Trophy was stolen in March 1966. Edward Bletchley was convicted. The actual thief was never found. The recovery was impossibly convenient. Institutional management of the story exceeded what the crime required. Whether this was a state-sponsored distraction or simply powerful organizations protecting themselves, the evidence never fully answers that. What it does answer is this: the story sold to the British public in 1966 was never the complete story. Football, money, and political power have always shared the same room. They still do. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe for more.